Hello, everybody. This is Michael Morgan from Sydney. We're just waiting on a couple more, so I guess get comfortable. Uh, Make sure your tea or coffee or glass of water is right, and as I say, in about 20 seconds, we'll make a start. Okay, let's make a start. First of all, obviously, welcome everybody and thank you for giving up some of your valuable time today. And I hope in return that you will get significant value out of what we're going to cover in the next half an hour. So, welcome. I'm Michael Morgan. And I know some of you know me, others might not, CEO of Herman International Asia. And as the slide says, I'm here to, I guess, really explain and share why 90% of the Fortune 100 companies regularly use whole brain thinking, as we say, to outthink, outpace, and outperform the competition. And we got some really interesting stuff to share with you. Just a couple of housekeeping issues before we start. Obviously, if you've got a question, you can type them into the sidebar, and Chris is helping moderate that. So, as I say, if you get a question, type it in and we'll be able to deal with it either on the fly or, as I say, at the end. We'll probably go for around about 30-35 minutes, shouldn't be much longer than that. And obviously, if you, again, we'll talk about questions, but we'll also follow up afterwards for those of you who need more information. Just to give you a feel for who we've got today, it's really exciting. We've got, obviously, I guess the majority of you from Australia, a couple from across the ditch, New Zealand, and then really exciting, we spread our wings. We've got Hong Kong, China, 2 from South America, 3 or 4 from Europe, and yeah, quite a few from India, and I think I mentioned Singapore as well. So a really good mixture, and I say a lot of interest going on in terms of whole brain thinking. So away we go. Now, why do 90% of the Fortune 100 companies regularly use, and regular is an interesting word, regularly use whole brain thinking? And that's what I want to cover today. And really the reason comes down to one thing, and it's because whole brain thinking, for those of you who know, is a little bit of magic. And I guess I met whole brain thinking 35 years ago, and I found it magical then, and I still find it magical. And what I want to do is explain where the magic comes from. Why is it magic? The first question, though, because I know for some of you this is new information, what is the HBDI? Now, on the screen at the moment, you can see what's actually, it's a photograph of the, if you like, the paper workbook pack that everyone gets when they complete the HBDI. And so when you complete that, you get a lot of information and you get your profile. One of the latest innovations that actually has just come out is not only do you get it in paper form, but you can now download it onto your smartphone, in particular your iPhone or iPad, and in a few months' time it'll be coming out on Android. So we really are moving away from paper into the, I guess, the online high-tech world, so that's something to look forward to. But again, what is the HBDI? Now, what I want to do to explain that is go through the 4 initials, HBDI. But I guess before I do that, the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument measures your thinking preference. And by that, it's not about what you think, but it really is about the way you think. Okay, do you think logically, or do you think more creatively, big picture, or are you a sequential thinker? And what I'm going to do now is say go through that. But what I want to do first of all is start with the H of the HBDI and just talk very quickly about each one of the four letters. So the H. Now the H stands for Ned Herman. And Ned first pioneered, I guess, the study of the brain, particularly in the field of business, while he was in charge of management development at General Electric's world-class corporate university in Cromptonville. And Ned, I guess, as a result of that research, wrote two very widely acclaimed books. His first one was called The Creative Brain, which traced the scientific and historical roots of all the innovative work that he did in the early days at General Electric. He then consolidated all this work into his 1995 book that was published by McGraw-Hill called The Whole Brain Business Book. In May this year, we will be releasing the revised Whole Brain Business Book, now updated sort of 10 years later. So that's something to look forward to. Now, one of the key things about the early work that Ned did and about the development of the HBDI was all the work that Ned did was around the application of thinking preferences and thinking to business. And that's, for me, part of the magic of the whole brain model, is that it was born out of business. And again, looking through the list of everybody listening today, we're all in business, so that's kind of exciting. So we will be talking about the type of thinking that business needs to survive. But that's the H. Ned Herman, I'm going to say, well worth dipping into these books. Let's talk about the B now, HBDI. The B obviously stands for brain, because the original work that Ned did was very much based on the brain and the explosion of knowledge that was coming out at that time, and of course, as we know, is still coming out, about the brain and how it works and its application to business. Now, again, as you know, that in the last 30 years, our understanding of the brain and how it works has exploded, and almost a day doesn't go by when there's a new discovery. And of course, neuroscience, as it's now known, is beginning to have a huge impact on business, on education, on health, on our well-being. And who knows, ultimately it might have a benefit for other people like Homer and so forth. So it really is a very exciting field to be in. So yes, back to the B, back to the brain, and back to Ned Herman. Ned was involved and was I guess networking, communicating with a lot of people in that time who were looking into the brain structure, brain function, right, and how we could take that knowledge into the world of business. And Ned's contribution was to develop what is a simple yet incredibly powerful metaphor, not for brain structure, but for the way we think. Right? And the whole brain model on the left of your screen is what we call an organizing principle. And it allows us to have one simple system that helps us understand the way we think, and therefore we can apply our new understanding of the way we think to almost every aspect of individual, team, and organizational performance. So making it accessible to each and every one of us. Now, the whole brain model, and as you can see, divides our thinking into 4 what we call specialized thinking clusters. And these thinking clusters, say, are represented by the whole brain model. So H, bit about the B, which I'll come back to in a minute. I want to talk briefly now about HBD, dominance. Now, I guess, hands up, or how many of you are right-handed as opposed to left-handed? How many of you are right-footed as opposed to left-footed? And how many of you actually are right-eyed and left-eyed? And we can actually work that out. So we know all about dominance. A quick exercise I'd love each one of you to do is to perhaps just sit up a little bit in your chairs and put your coffee or your pen down for a minute, and without giving it much thought at all, is just fold your arms. Right? Okay, so you've all folded your arms. Now what I'd like you to do is unfold your arms and fold them the other way. So put the other hand on top and the other hand through. Right? And just feel possibly how strange or different or uncomfortable that feels. Then perhaps go back to the normal way that you would fold your arms. And this is really what thinking preferences and the whole brain model is all about, in that we're not saying that you can or can't fold your arms one way or the other, but we are saying that unless you stop and think, you will fold your arms a preferred way, a dominant way. And when you fold it the other way, you've got to stop, you've got to think, feels a little bit uncomfortable, and all you want to do is go back, to your normal way of folding your arms, or in our case, your normal way of thinking. And when we start exploring the whole brain model in a little bit more depth, we come up with what we call our 4 different selves. Now, depending upon the strength of a preference, you might be just one of these selves, or you might be a lovely blend and mixture of all 4, or you might be just a balance of 2 of them. It depends. But the 4 selves we talk about are the blue rational self, the green safekeeping self, the red what we call the feeling self, and the yellow, the experimental self. For instance, again, I know some of you know me, others don't, but I'm really all experimental. I'm somebody who infers, imagines, speculates, takes risk, highly impetuous, breaks rules and so forth. And if I look across to the green, which is diagonally across, oh dear, I'm not somebody who takes preventative action, who establishes procedures and so on. Now, my thinking preference, like yours, it's not a question of being good or bad, but there are some consequences that in my thinking. In other words, I break rules, I'm not very reliable, and there are consequences of those, and sometimes those consequences, I guess, are okay, other times I get into trouble and so on. Probably listening, we have people who are more logical, you analyze more, you're realistic, you like numbers, and you have a career, you make decisions that reflect that, and so on. So this is the whole brain model that underpins really everything we do. And if there is a goal in what we do, I guess we would say that it's probably good to be whole-brained. So here is the summary of that, what we call the whole brain model: logical, analytical, fact-based and quantitative, organized, sequential, planned, detailed, interpersonal, feeling-based, kinesthetic and emotional, and holistic, intuitive, integrating and synthesizing. The interesting thing in life, and if we go back to dominance and handedness, most of us are right-handed. I think 1 in 10 people are left-handed, and very few people are ambidextrous. We talk about the whole brain model, but very few of us are actually whole-brained. And if we look at the data we've got, what we find, for instance, is some interesting numbers: 7%, 60%, 30%, and 3%. What we find from our global database of over 2 million people is that of the people in the database, we find 7% of people have a preference in 1 quadrant. In other words, it could be that in that blue quadrant, if you're one of these people, then you'll have a strong preference for the logical, rational, analytical, and not a preference for anything else. So almost every single choice that you've made in life will be driven out of that one quadrant. Whereas what we find is that 60% of people have a preference for two quadrants, whichever one they are. I don't know, it could vary. 30% of people have a preference for three quadrants, and this is the interesting point, less than 3% of people are ambidextrous, or less than 3% of people have equal preference in all four quadrants. What does that mean? What's I guess, the implications of that? We're, I guess, great believers, and if you look at almost anything that you see written anywhere, life really does demand whole brain thinking. It's situational in that, depending upon the situation you're in, you might need to be more logical now, and you might be, need to be more creative, at another time, and so forth. But overall, as you move from, I guess, childhood through adolescence, through middle age and so forth, yeah, life is going to pull you into all of those four quadrants. One big issue that we know, I guess, leaders are facing, leadership, we talk about mental agility, thinking agility, and I think this life's journey certainly shows the need, to access those four quadrants, the need to be agile, the need to be probably situationally whole brain. Okay, HBD, that was a little bit about D. Let's now move into the I, the instrument bit. And I showed you this before. This is the printout, if you like, of somebody's profile, and it comes from them completing the HBDI, which is the Hermann Brain Dominance Instrument. Now, the instrument asks you 20 questions, and these 20 questions range across a wide, if you like, variety of questions. We'll ask you what you did at school, we'll ask you about your job, we ask you about hobbies, we ask you about other interests, tasks, how you perform that. We ask you a whole range of questions. The idea being that we're not only interested, if you like, in you at work, but we'd want to know, you at home, you at school, you studying, and so forth. So we end up with this one profile that gives you a complete understanding about your thinking preference, which basically doesn't change whatever it is you're doing during the day. Now, here's an example of somebody's profile, and what I want to do is just give you a feel for, I guess, an understanding of some of the information contained in a typical profile. So working from the top down, you'll see that the arrow is pointing towards where it says preference code. And in this particular example, this person is a 2111. Now, we give people a code depending upon the strength of their preference. And they can either have a 1 or a 2 or a 3. In this particular case, they have a 2 in the blue, which indicates that it's what we call a use. And in fact, if you look down on the next, or the 2 lines down, the profile score, you'll find this person has a 2 because they're 56 in the blue. They have a 1 because they're 75, a 1 because they're 98 in the red, and a 1 because they're 90 in the yellow. So this is what we'd call triple dominant, 3 preferences, 1 in the green, 1 in the red, 1 in the yellow, and a use in the blue. And these are plotted, as you can see on that profile, with the solid line. This person could get what we call an avoid, or a 3, if at any stage that profile score was less than 33, and therefore we would plot that a bit like a bullseye on a dartboard. We would plot that in the middle of the profile. But again, this is just to give you an example. Now, one of the other things we're always interested in is, does your thinking change when you're under pressure, when you're really making a decision that is very important to you? Ned always used to say, when push comes to shove, when you've got to make a choice and it's an important choice, does your thinking change? Now, one of the questions, and I guess I'm now getting into instrument design and question design, but one of the questions in the HBDI is a series of forced choice questions that we call the adjective pairs. And this is really to put you under a bit of pressure when you fill out the form. And the way these report out at the top is this person, their adjective pair score is 6 in the blue, 5 in the green, 4 in the red, and the 9 in the yellow. But what does that mean? We plot that as the dotted line, and what this means, and if you look at the dotted line, is for whatever reason, and I don't know the reason just by looking at this profile, but for whatever reason, Joanna Doe slips out of the red quadrant and becomes stronger in the blue and stronger in the yellow. Now, I don't know why that's happening, and the only way I would find out, obviously, is talking to Joanna and exploring it. And that's very much part of working with people with the HBDI is, as a certified practitioner, we train you to have such a discussion, because it could be very significant that Joanna understands that at certain times, for certain reasons, her thinking shifts, and she's less interpersonal, she's less intuitive, but it looks as though she becomes more perhaps logical. I'm not sure what it is, but certainly more open to risk. And helping Joanna and other people who work with Joanna understand that, as I say, could be important. So that's just a quick look at a typical profile, but also, as we say, the importance of sitting with whoever you're working with and really helping them understand their profile. One of the interesting things, though, about these profiles, about thinking preference, is that there is a strong correlation between job choice and thinking preference. And if you think about yourself for the moment, and if you think about people you work with, you'll probably find that the more logical, rational thinkers do work in technical, financial areas. You have your scientific people who are logical, but they're also conceptual, and the artistic people who are less, I guess, logical, less organized, but very strong in the entrepreneurial yellow. You then find people who are strong in the blue and the green, and they'll work in legal, managerial jobs, whereas people who are stronger on the right-hand side in the yellow and the red, probably a high proportion of people listening today are there because we're in the developmental, expressive areas. And down the bottom, the administrative, supervisory people, strong green, customer service, because that's a blend of the structure of the green and the, I guess, the people side of the red, and and so forth. So that's beginning for me to get into the magic of this. And I can still remember 30 years ago when I first met Ned Herman, and he was giving a keynote address, and I was sitting in the audience. It was my first exposure to this, and I thought to myself, how does he know all this about me when he's never met me? And of course, what he was doing was talking, I guess, in generalities about the implications of thinking preference, and how it manifests itself through the career and job choices you make. And I was thinking, wow, now I really do begin to understand who I am and my life's journey. That was part of the magic. The other part of the magic for me is really the power of the HBDI, in that from the blue quadrant, it's highly valid, and in fact it has enormous validity, in particular face validity that I'll come on to in a minute. It's research based, based on an understanding of the brain and the way we think. But one of the powerful things for business is that it makes this very clear very quickly. And again, for those of you listening in today who already know this, you know that by morning tea of a half-day workshop, people have got it, and that's very, very powerful. Other things about this model and about the HBDI is that it's highly actionable. People can understand where their preferences are, perhaps where their preferences aren't, and so they can take action quickly. You can implement it quickly, but also because it's about thinking, it applies almost to every context that you live in. So you can sit there and say, oh, I understand the home I live in, whether it's parents, whether it's a partner, whether it's children. You suddenly think, wow, now I understand why my child is struggling with their maths homework. But you also understand the context of work, why you get on some people, why you don't with others, why the project team is faltering a little bit. And of course then there's the world of clients, of customers, why you hit it off with one customer, you struggle with another. So highly actionable across multiple contexts. The HBDI is non-judgmental. There is no good, bad, right or wrong. There's certainly consequences, right? But we're not saying, oh, you've got to improve in this area, because you might not need to. Another thing about the HBDI, because it's about you, right, and your, if you like, life's journey, people find it incredibly memorable. Because, as I say, it's emotional, if you like. It's about people. And again, I've talked. It's non-judgmental. And one of the big things that Ned was, I guess, keen on right from the beginning is the capacity to develop. It's one thing to know how you arrived at today. It's another thing to say, I need to grow and change. And the HBDI, or the whole brain model, will give you that map for change. The last word I put in there is simple, and perhaps, well, no, it is the right word. It's not simplistic, but it is simple, which is the reason why business likes it, because business doesn't have time to learn things that are complex. So people get it quickly and they can use it. And when I say people, a lot of people have got it. We've probably worked with over 2 million people around the world. We've certainly got over 1.2, 1.3 million people in our database, and we're beginning now to look and ask very meaningful questions of that global database. And I guess in terms of questions, let me come back to the original question today. Why do 90% of Fortune 100 companies regularly use whole brain thinking? And the reason is that when we start working with organizations, we really start working with individuals. And as I say, the biggest aha I got when I first met Ned Herman, when I sat in the audience and he started to explain this, I suddenly realized why I loved history, why I struggled with Latin, why I didn't like music and dance, but why I liked one chemistry master and I didn't like the other. And suddenly I thought, wow, I could actually do better at school. when I was asked, what do you what do you want to be when you grow up? Suddenly I understood my dream job. I ended up in agriculture, and I knew why. Some of the decisions that we have to make, during life, suddenly they became clear. Not only, I guess, how to make that decision, but why did I choose agriculture as opposed to veterinary science or nuclear science or whatever it was? It's helped me enormously through my life in terms of solving problems, life's problems when they come up. And it really answered the question of why I put my hand up for some things, and not others. So incredibly powerful from an individual point of view. And that is so important today with the age, I guess, of engagement and empowerment. But from an organizational point of view, it's fascinating. Microsoft used the whole brain model as the framework for game design. And if any of you have stood in front of the Connect game and played some of those games, those were designed using the whole brain model as the design framework so that they would engage the entire family. Coca-Cola has used the whole brain model as the model for collaboration and cooperation throughout all their distribution and bottling plants. Fascinating application. This is just one example where this was a magazine that was struggling a little bit, and using the whole brain model to redesign the magazine, to diagnose what the readers wanted, to diagnose and work with the creative people, to work with the writers. They completely changed, I guess, the design, I've got to say, the flavor of the magazine. And so they turned sales around using the whole brain model and the HBDI to diagnose and design where they're going. Cirque du Soleil, one of the best examples, not only of, I guess, a creative company, but actually of a whole brain company. And their creativity is renowned, but also their systems and processes in terms of selection are legendary. And every single leadership team behind their shows uses the HBDI and the team profile. We did some fascinating work with Telecom New Zealand around call centres and communication. The reason why these companies use it is that, it works, because they know, and I think we all know in this day and age, better thinking leads to better performance, and that gives organisations better results, and whole brain thinking, say, is one way to get there. Whole brain thinking powered by the HBDI. Now, I've mentioned those companies, Coca-Cola and so forth. We talk about ROI, not only return on investment, but we call it return on intelligence. So if you're strong in the blue, if you have strong preferences in the blue, you bring that sort of thing. But ROI, your return on intelligence or your return on implementation. How good is the organization getting things done? How good is the organization in what we call ROI interactions? Can you close a sale in one meeting rather than 4? Can you solve an HR problem in 1 rather than 4? How effective are you as a coach? That's the ROI, return on interactions. And obviously ROI ideas. So the whole concept that we work with is your return on intelligence. How do you use the HBDI to get that return on intelligence? We would say you start with the individual profile, you then work with those significant relationships in your life, your boss, your partner, your co-worker, whoever it is. You then move to teams, obviously, and ultimately the organizational data that you can you can use, and companies are now taking that externally to clients as well. So yes, it starts with you, and that's to me where the magic is. And if I have to say, what is it that Home International does? What is it that the HBDI does? What is it that the whole brain thinking does? Is it gives individuals that empowering, magical moment when you give them their HBDI and their results, they go, ah, that explains it. Now I understand why. And that, as I said, is very, very powerful. Okay, I think I've spent probably a little bit longer than I said I would, but I do get excited and do get a bit carried away. We've got a few questions, and looking at them, they're a little bit detailed. So what I will do is respond to those afterwards. As I say, this has been just a quick introduction to the HBDI. And why 90% of the Fortune 100 companies regularly use it. And I'm just going to leave you with one simple word. And before I do that, thank you for hanging in there. Thank you for listening. But the answer as to why they use it is quite simple. Because it works. Okay, a couple of, I guess, questions we have got is we will be in touch with you in the next few days, probably by email, just to make sure that you're happy, and if you do need anything else, as I say, we will deal with that. So once again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever in this wonderful world you are.